let's talk about something really important. Something a lot of us feel, but don't always say out loud. How do you share a lifetime of wisdom with the people you love in a way they can actually hear you?
There's this idea that really hits home for a lot of people. It's that the most valuable thing you have, all that hard-won perspective, that resilience, that practical truth you've earned over decades, is the one thing your loved ones just don't seem to want. If that feels familiar, trust me, you are not alone. It's this incredibly frustrating feeling, right? You've navigated careers, you've raised a family, you've been through it all, and you see your kid or your grandkid about to step into a hole you know so well. Your first instinct, your loving instinct, is to shout watch out, to give them the map. But instead of thanks, you get, what? A polite nod, a defensive tone, or maybe just silence. It feels like a punch to the gut, like they're dismissing everything you've learned.
But what if I told you this rejection isn't personal? Not at all. What if it's not about your wisdom, but about some really predictable things going on in the human brain? In this explainer, we're going to follow a roadmap to figure this out. We'll start with why your wisdom can feel like an unwanted gift. Then we'll get into the psychology of why that happens. After that, we'll shift our thinking and learn a new tool set, the solicited narrative protocol. We'll wrap up with 4 steps you can take right away and a new way to see yourself as the wisdom anchor for your family. So first, let's talk about a basic human drive. Psychologists have a word for it: generativity. It's just a fancy way of saying that in the second half of our lives, we feel this deep, powerful need to guide and contribute to the next generation. We want our lives to mean something, to leave things better than we found them. So when we try to share our wisdom and get met with a brick wall, it doesn't just sting a little. It hits us right in that core need, and it can leave you feeling frustrated and like all your experience is just going to waste. Okay, so this is the million-dollar question, isn't it? If the advice is good and you're coming from a place of love, what's going wrong? Why is this gift met with so much resistance? Well, it turns out the answer isn't about what you're saying. It's all about how you're saying it. And, more importantly, the psychology of the person who's hearing it. Now, this next part is a huge mental shift. The problem isn't that you're preachy or that they're stubborn. The real issue is these powerful, almost invisible psychological forces that are at play anytime advice is given. Think of them like hidden currents in a river that are steering the conversation before you even open your mouth. Let's break down the 2 big ones. The first one is this fascinating thing called psychological reactance. Basically, we are all hardwired with an internal alarm that goes off whenever we feel like someone is trying to take away our freedom to choose. When you offer unsolicited advice, even with the best intentions, their brain can hear a threat. It screams, "Hey, don't tell me what to do." And to prove it's still in control, it will have a strong urge to do the exact opposite of what you suggested. So when you say you really should be saving more money, their brain doesn't hear good advice. It hears a challenge to its autonomy, and its first instinct is to push back. And that leads us right into the second big issue, especially in families, the autonomy-wisdom paradox. See, for years, you were the authority. That was your job. But now your adult kids are in a phase of life where their main job is to prove to themselves and the world that they are competent, that they are the authority in their own lives. So when you offer advice, no matter how good it is, it can feel like a subtle judgment. It can feel like you're saying you can't handle this on your own. This puts them in a terrible spot. Either they take your advice and feel small, or they reject it to protect their own sense of independence. It's a no-win situation. So here's the bottom line. The old model of being the instructor just doesn't work anymore. That role is all about giving directions, pushing information, and usually focusing on your successes. But that just makes the other person feel less competent. The new role we need to step into is the consultant. A consultant doesn't give orders. They tell stories. Their wisdom isn't pushed, it's pulled. And this is the really important part. The key that unlocks the door isn't a story about how you got everything right, but a story about a time you were vulnerable, a time you got it wrong. This brings us to the big mindset shift. It's the core of the solution, really. Stop trying to push your wisdom onto people. Instead, you need to create a situation where they want to pull it from you. Think about it. The best consultants in the world don't just show up and start telling everyone what to do. They get invited in, they listen, they ask a ton of questions, they earn the right to give their opinion. That's the mindset we want to adopt. This idea is so powerful. True, lasting change doesn't happen when someone follows your instructions. It happens when they have that aha moment and feel like they figured it out themselves. When that happens, it's not your lesson anymore. It's theirs. It's part of who they are. Our goal isn't to get the credit for the answer. It's to be the quiet guide who helps them find it on their own. Okay, so the mindset makes sense, but how do we actually do this when we're in a real conversation? That's where this practical tool comes in, the Solicited Narrative Protocol, or S&P for short. This isn't just a theory. It's a specific 3-part toolkit you can use to navigate that psychological minefield and turn a moment of potential conflict into a moment of real connection. The S&P is built on these 3 pillars, and they work best in order. The permission script is all about honoring their independence. The failure first rule is about making it safe for them to listen. And the Socratic bridge helps them discover the wisdom for themselves. Let's break down each one. This one question, it's like a magic key. It completely changes the dynamic. Think about what it's doing. It doesn't assume they want your help. It frames your wisdom as just a perspective, not some universal truth. But the most important part is that last phrase, would you be open to hearing it? That hands all the control over to them. By letting them say yes or no, you've honored their autonomy. That reactance alarm we talked about, it never even goes off. When they say yes, they are now actively pulling the information from you. The game has changed. So, once you have their permission, the next step is absolutely crucial. The temptation is to tell a story about how you were a hero, how you succeeded. But the failure first rule says to do the exact opposite. Start with a story about a time you messed up or a time you were scared. See, when you share a success story, you're the expert and they're the novice. But when you lead with a failure, you're not on a pedestal anymore. You're just another person who's been through it. That vulnerability makes you relatable, makes you safe. Your wisdom is no longer a judgment. It's a lesson from a shared struggle. All right, this is the final piece of the puzzle. After you've gotten permission and shared a vulnerable story, you'll be tempted to just give them the answer, to say, so here's what you should do. The Socratic bridge helps you resist that urge. Instead of providing the answer, you build a bridge to their own insight by asking a question. Something like, what's the hardest part of this for you? Or what do you think one small step forward could look like? This turns you from a lecturer into a partner, and it helps them find the answer themselves, which means it'll actually... So now that we have the protocol, let's get even more practical. We can boil this all down to 4 habits that you can start practicing today. Think of these as the daily exercises that will build your muscle as that trusted consultant for your family. Step 1. The story not instruction rule. This is so simple, but it's a game changer. Just make a commitment to get the word should out of your vocabulary when you're talking to your loved ones. Should is the #1 trigger for that reactance we talked about. It's a command. Instead, just replace it with a story. Instead of saying, you should be saving more, try something like, this reminds me of a time I was absolutely terrified about my own savings. One builds a wall, the other opens a door. Okay, here are the other 3 practices. First, try vulnerability benchmarking. That just means you don't wait for a big crisis to be vulnerable. In a normal, everyday conversation, just share a quick story about a time you made a mistake or felt unsure. This makes you a safe person to talk to when the big stuff does happen. Second, you need to define the consultant window. This just means having one direct conversation to reset expectations. You can say something like, look, I know my first instinct is always to jump in and help, but I respect that you're on your own path. So from now on, I'm here if you ever want my 2 cents, but I'm going to wait for you to ask. That one conversation can change everything. And finally, learn to use the perspective shift question. When someone is drowning in the details of a problem, your biggest superpower is your long-term view. Just gently ask them, 10 years from now, looking back, what part of this will still matter? That question helps them find their own perspective. So, what's the end goal here? It's about completely reimagining your role. You stop being the frustrated instructor, and you become something so much more powerful, so much more essential. You become the family's wisdom anchor. An anchor doesn't steer the boat, it just holds it steady in a storm. It's that reliable, stable point in a world that feels chaotic. And this is really the whole thing in a nutshell. Your influence doesn't have to fade away, it just transforms. It's not about control anymore, it's about creating an invitation. When you become that trusted consultant, your wisdom becomes so approachable and so safe that people won't just accept your invitation. Eventually, they'll be the ones asking for it. Let this one really sink in. You are the living bridge between your family's past and its future. Nobody else holds that story. And when you make this shift, your legacy isn't some dusty rule book that nobody reads. It becomes a living library, a place your family can always turn to for perspective and comfort. You become the anchor. Okay, so this is where it gets real. Here's our first step, your call to action. The very next time a loved one tells you about a problem they're having, I want you to resist that urge to jump in and fix it. Just take a breath. And then ask the question. That sounds tough. I went through something kind of like that once. Would you be open to hearing about it? that one question could be the beginning of everything.